interfering aggressively in the internal affairs of Syria. These plans have crossed other plans and interests of non-Arab states aiming at destroying Syria and destabilizing it. This has happened for no other reason other than the fact that Syria does not want to depend on anyone, nor would Syria accept that its sovereignty will be compromised, and because it insists on the independence of its decision and on the preservation of its sovereignty and the interests and security of its people. Mr. President, after some powerful circles imposed on these international organizations a policy of double standards and made this part and parcel of its work, even if it were undeclared or unwritten, we are witness to another stage that is based on creating illusory terms of reference based on the policy of imposing false facts. Some try to convince the public opinion that those who try to defend the independence of their countries, following on the road of Simon Bolivar, Gandhi, Dmitry Donskov, and Mandela, and George Washington, and Mossadegh, and De Gaulle, and Nasser, and Emir Abdul Qadir, and Sultan Basha al-Atrash, and Ho Chi Minh, and Sun Jong-shan, those, I say, are classified as terrorists and pariahs, working outside international legitimacy. Those who are trying to preserve their countries safe from creative chaos and terror have become violators of human rights and killers of their own people. Those who win the support of the majority of their people have lost legitimacy and have to step down. It is really strange these days, Mr. President, that some oligarchic states co-sponsor draft resolutions promoting the alternation of power, the freedom of assembly, the promotion of democracy, and the protection and promotion of human rights, and that those very states who don't even have a constitution, let alone a genuine electoral system, and who have only exercised democracy through satellite stations and fancy conference halls, those same countries, I say, unfortunately, resort to the Security Council to ask for reform and for democracy. Syria, Mr. President, had a parliament in 1919. By that I mean 1 year after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, while Lawrence of Arabia was wreaking havoc with the destinies and the resources of these states and was trying to turn the clock back to obscurantism. Mr. President, Syria signed the protocol of Arab observers because we were keen on keeping this issue under the Arab roof. Syria proved its full and accurate commitment to the Arab plan and the protocol signed between Syria and the Secretariat of the League of Arab States. The report of the observer mission already confirmed this fact in paragraphs 37, 38, 39, and 73 of the report. It confirmed clearly what we said in the past. It confirmed that there is a media, political, misleading, deliberate, and systematic campaign to distort and fabricate facts. And here I refer to paragraphs 29, 68, and 69 of the report. The report also spoke about the presence of terrorist groups that used the legitimate demands by the Syrian people for reform to destabilize Syria and undermine its security and to undertake terrorist attacks against the institutions of the state and against civilians and military personnel alike, paragraphs 26, 27, 71, and 75. Furthermore, paragraph 44 of the report clearly indicates that the Gilles Jacquier, the French journalist, was killed as a result of mortar attacks fired by the opposition. Syria finds it strange that this tragic event did not move the French diplomacy to indignation, particularly that Syria established a committee of inquiry to investigate the details of this event, chaired by a judge and through the participation of a representative of the French channel in which the journalists used to work. The Secretary General of the League of Arab States read some paragraphs in his statement. I regret that he selected items from the report and left others. I would only like to read paragraph 26. Paragraph 26 says, in certain instances, government forces use force as a reaction to attacks against its personnel. The observers, Arab observers, that noticed that there are armed groups using thermal bombs and anti-armor bombs. End of quotation. The Secretary General of the League of Arab States, who is a dear colleague, objected to requests by members of this council to invite General Dabi to participate in today's meeting. The report of Arab observers was not sent to you as part of the documents that were dispatched from the headquarters of the League of Arab States. Mr. President, the decision by the League of Arab States to go to the Council is only an attempt to bypass the success of the task of Arab observers and an attempt to ignore its report. The report, unfortunately, came against the plans by some Arab and non-Arab parties who falsely claim attachment to the Arab role in settling the Syrian crisis at a time when they worked by different means to abort the mission of the observers, and they waged a political and media war against it. Some Arab officials and some Europeans have doubted the meaning of the and the meaningfulness of the mission, including the Prime Minister of Qatar, who visited New York, Washington, and other capitals only 2 weeks after the beginning of the work of the mission, making statements that the continuation of the mission of observers is useless, and asked that the Syrian issue be transferred to the Security Council. This happened while Syria was fully committed to the provisions of the protocol, despite the twofold increase in the number of those killed among forces of the government, and despite acts of aggression on public and private property. That is all due to instructions to armed groups from the outside to use the presence of the mission as a time for escalation. Syria rejects any decision outside the Arab plan that it agreed to and the protocol that it signed with the League of Arab States. It considers the resolution adopted by the meeting of the Council of Arab States a violation of its national sovereignty, a flagrant interference in its internal affairs, and a blatant violation of the purposes for which the League of Arab States was established. It was also a violation of Article 8 of the Charter of the League of Arab States. Strangely enough, Mr. President and ladies and gentlemen, the League of Arab States requested the Syrian government to extend the mandate of the mission of the observers for 1 month. Damascus agreed. However, The League of Arab States soon contradicted itself when it ignored the results of the report of the mission and tried to transfer a crisis from an Arab country to the Security Council and halted the work of the mission of observers later on. Mr. President, this unbridled tendency by some foreign states to interfere in our internal and external affairs through various means is neither sudden nor novel. It has systematically occurred since the Sykes-Picot Accords of 1916 and the Balfour Declaration in 1917, let alone the infinite support provided to Israel in its aggressive, hostile policies and occupation of Arab lands. Mr. President, we all know that the international legal framework in whose parameters states work is based on respect for sovereignty and non-interference in internal affairs. These two principles were consecrated in the Charter of the United Nations and not Article 52 of the Charter to which Dr. Al-Arabi referred. Also, in Article 8 of the Charter of the League of Arab States. In this context, we stress the exclusive responsibility of the Syrian government in the preservation of civic peace and security, in protecting its citizens from acts of destruction and sabotage undertaken by armed forces, armed elements, and not peaceful demonstrators. In accordance with Syrian law as well as international agreements to which Syria is a party, including the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Regrettably, and instead of respecting these firm principles of international law, and in the context of feverish attempts to interfere in the internal affairs of Syria by co-sponsors of the French resolution against Syria, some of whose officials who have suddenly fallen in love with the Syrian people after an emotional hibernation towards our people for centuries. Those, I say, foolishly dream of the return of colonialism and hegemony through these resolutions and through concocting new terms to justify the interference in Syrian internal affairs, through misleading the world public opinion, mimicking exactly what they did when they misled the world public opinion when 130,000 Libyan civilians were killed and 1 million Iraqis were killed using the pretext of looking for weapons of armed destruction and under the pretext of promoting democracy, searching for weapons of mass destruction, which were not there to begin with, the destruction of Afghanistan under the pretext of fighting terrorism, and establishing clandestine prisons and detention centers in Guantanamo, Abu Ghraib, under the pretext of promoting freedom. We stress that Syria draws its strength from the strength of its people, and that it will stand firm in confronting its enemies. We call all those who are fomenting the crisis and bent on exacerbating it to reconsider these policies and to end massacring the Syrian people. One cannot be an arsonist and a firefighter at the same time. We call on them to support national dialogue and the Syrian political reform process implemented by the Syrian leadership in response to the legitimate demands by the people. By way of example, I say that in February we will hold a referendum on a new constitution for the country that guarantees party and political pluralism, as well as alternation of power. Parliamentary elections will also be held in the first half of the year, leaving the final say to the ballot box. In conclusion, we expect the Security Council to be a platform encouraging dialogue as a way to settle crises. We don't expect it to provoke or aggravate crises. We believe that an exacerbation of the crisis leads to undermining international peace and security instead of preserving them. We welcome in this regard